During the American Revolutionary War, a small fortified US camp had received orders to withhold an incoming British attack. Rumors were that the British force that was heading towards them was over 300 men strong. The American commanding officer knew they did not have the men or weaponry to withstand such a force. But orders were orders, and he positioned his men in the trenches. The Americans also had artillery, but this was very inaccurate. But the worst thing was that the Americans did not have enough men to protect their right flank. He hoped that the British would not notice their weak spot. The British army appeared before them, and the American soldiers grew silent as they saw the red mass approach. The officer knew he had sent his men to their deaths. The Americans opened fire on the British. The British broke etiquette and headed for cover. A huge problem was the inaccuracy and long loading times of the weapons. Most Americans could only pull off 2 shots as the British crossed the field. A thick layer of smoke from the gunpowder covered the British advance, and it was difficult for the Americans to pick out targets. The British emerged from the smoke and had reached the Americans' first line of defense. The Americans fought valiantly as they tried to prevent the British from entering the trenches. Most of the Americans were only able to shoot once and were killed while trying to reload. Word had gotten around of the weak right flank, and a large part of the British army headed straight for it. The few US soldiers that were stationed there tried their best, but got overrun fairly easy. The British were in the trenches and quickly took care of the first line of defense. Like a mass of ants, they rushed upward into the trenches. The American second line of defense was still at full strength, but due to the thick smoke they had no idea that they were being surrounded. And the British kept sending in more and more troops. The second line finally noticed that the British had broken through their right flank, but it was already too late. They were completely surrounded and a massacre unfolded. The commanding officer was killed, and none of the soldiers were spared. The British had reached the center and claimed victory as all Americans lay dead. The Americans never stood a chance. Even after the battle, the British force was still massive. It had barely lost any men in the field, and most died as they tried to breach first line of defense. the British seized the day.